Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm Ryan, a member of the CK12 team, and my colleague Katie and I will be running today's webinar, Groups in Practice 101. We're so glad you've joined us here today. Before I introduce you to CK12, I'd like to do a quick reminder about the Zoom platform. Right now, you should see two different options on your Zoom screen, one for Q&A and one for chat. During today's presentation, whenever you have a question about CK12, please post it in the Q&A window. The chat window is a place for a community conversation. We'd love for you all to introduce yourselves. If you're an educator, please feel free to share where you live and the subjects you teach. Just make sure in the chat window that you are sending any general posts to all panelists and attendees, and not just to CK12 or the panelists. Also, while we don't anticipate any technical issues during our broadcast, if you have any trouble with your video or your sound, please let us know in the Q&A or the chat window. Right now, I'm going to turn this over to my colleague Katie to get you started with today's content.
Thanks, Ryan. And thank you to everyone who joined us today for our session on groups and practice. In this webinar, we'll be covering the following topics. CK12's adaptive practice system. This includes a database of over 150,000 questions, and it adapts to students by challenging them with harder questions or recommending resources. We'll then cover CK12 class and study groups, so both creating groups and then sharing content and hosting discussions, and then also the options for assignments within classes. And finally, assignments and student progress, so assigning practice and other modalities, and seeing student work, including answers, levels, and time spent through CK12 class groups. Our main goal is that by the end of this session, you understand how our adaptive practice system works. You can assign practice and other modalities to your classes, and you can monitor student progress.
But before we get into the core content of the webinar, it would be great if we found out a little bit more about you. You'll see a poll here in a few seconds that will ask about your current knowledge of CK12's adaptive practice. This question asks how familiar you are with our adaptive practice tool. This will tell us how in depth we should go into our tools in this webinar. So please let us know if you're new to adaptive practice, have used CK12's adaptive practice occasionally, or use it frequently. I'll pause here so allow you to answer this question. All right, so it looks like most of us are fairly new to adaptive practice, and so today's session will be particularly helpful for you. And there are also people who use this practice occasionally or even frequently, and they could potentially help in the Q&A session or also just ask more in-depth questions. So at this point, I'm going to hand it back over to Katie, and we'll get started then.
Thanks, Ryan. So definitely useful information as I move forward. I want to talk just a little bit about this session versus some of our advanced sessions. So this is called Groups in Practice 101. By the end of this session, you guys should be able to find appropriate practice for various concepts, assign practice reads and interactives and other modalities to your classes, make an educated guess regarding the best use of study versus class groups, create a new study or class group, and then find detailed per question feedback on students, and quickly get a feel for the number of students in a class that have completed any given assignment. Our customizing practice session, which is kind of the advanced version of this particular session, includes a lot more in-depth content. So that includes customizing practice into quizzes, settings for quizzes, adding concepts to a quiz, a bunch of things on selecting, reordering, and creating questions, using our math editor, and then the idea of creating and reports for multi-concept assignments, as well as for quizzes. So if you're wanting additional help with any of these particular topics, or with our integration with learning management systems, such as Google Classroom, Canvas, Schoology, and Edmodo, please be aware that this particular session focuses on the basics. So we're going to prioritize questions related to those basics during this webinar. However, we will always stay on to address any complex customizing questions or ones that are appropriate as I go through that need a live demonstration. So don't worry, you'll still get your questions answered, but just know that we're going to prioritize the basics for the new people to this particular content.
Thanks, Katie. So with that said, let's go ahead and move right into adaptive practice. So adaptive practice, what is it? Adaptive practice is a digital assessment tool that adapts to student input. CK12's adaptive practice tool is a digital tool designed to meet students at their current level of understanding and help them master the next step for any concept. Because of that, our system will bump students up to available hardware questions if they are successfully answering, or it will make recommendations such as text or to read, or a video to watch, or an interactive to work with, if students find the current level too challenging. Why should I use it? It will give you access to 150,000 plus questions and also allow reports of student progress on assigned work. When students submit their work, you as the teacher can see info such as the time they spent, the streak, and the level of questions. Note that because our adaptive practice system meets students where they are, a student who is struggling may hit the goal of 10 correct with all easy questions, and a student who is more advanced would have more of a mix of levels. For teachers, this ensures that each student is progressively and appropriately challenged while maintaining a clear record of each student's level of understanding. Where do I get it? In addition to the website, there's a free CK12 app available for all smartphones and tablets. This tool provides the ability for students to practice at their own pace on any electronic device, whether in school, at home, on the bus, or even on the way to a game. And again, these are just so you can see it. You can get it online, on the Android store, or iOS. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Katie for some demonstration.
So Ryan, thanks for that introduction. I think at this point in time, I'm going to share my screen so that you guys can actually start seeing what this looks like on our site. So let's see if you guys can see that part. Let's try one more time. I don't think that actually shared. So share screen. There we go. Okay, so this is our homepage. There are a number of different ways to get to practice within CK12. And the first is to either search for a particular topic or to browse for a topic on CK12. So let's say I wanted to see all the subjects CK12 offered, and I was teaching 4th grade. So maybe multiplication and division, and then factors. And I could go into that particular topic, and this pulls up the concept page. So it has an interactive, some videos, and the assessment. If I click on this practice, that will take me to our practice page. And there's a couple of things here that will be useful for you. One is this assign to class feature, which I'll keep pointing out as we go through. You can even customize this practice and turn it into a quiz, which is kind of that advanced version. And you could pull information to download this or even embed it in one of our Flexbooks or elsewhere. So sort of all different options on this page. And then you could preview your practice there. I could similarly just search for this topic, identify factor pairs, and it would pull up the concept, different options, and I can filter and find kind of my assessments accordingly to find that practice. So one option is to go through either the branch and the topic there or through search as well. And then the other way to find stuff would be to go back to our homepage, and this little logo up here will take you back there, so that's always helpful to pull up. And let's pick a different topic. So let's say I pulled a topic up in physics. Now I could do that through the physics option, or I could go down and I could explore different areas of CK12. And in this case, we're talking about adaptive practice. So I'm going to click on the adaptive practice icon. And this brings up all of the practice for our different areas on CK12. And this is our adaptive practice questions. So I could go, just like I did kind of in that 4th grade option, I could go into physics. I could pick a topic here, one of our major topics. And then you'll see the different concepts related to that topic. Now, I, as a teacher, have previewed some of these, and a student would see the same thing. They'll see these percentages that, they've gotten 2 correct on the first part, 7 out of 10 goal correct for this part here as well. So it'll show you those percentages as you're working your way through. But then you can go into a particular topic. So let's open up projectile motion and we'll see what this practice looks like. As a teacher, if I'm going from this direction, I still have the option to assign it to a class. I have the option to customize it or to download it just like I would on that main page. A student's just going to see the option to kind of do their assignment. They won't see all of these choices, but they'll still get the chance to start practicing. They will also see a couple of other pieces. This estimated time to complete it, so to get that goal of 10, and that's based on kind of how students have been doing so far. And then if they had been on that concept page, all of these other modalities, the text for it, maybe some interactives, a video to understand the concept, those would all be available at the top of that concept page. But in this case, because you're not on that concept page, we still give you that option to access those resources right here before you start practicing. Now, if I click start practicing, and in a kid's case, it would say start doing the concept as well. So they'd start seeing that option. This brings you to the practice tool. Now, as Ryan said, this is also available through a couple of different apps, whether you're on a tablet or a phone, but you can do this directly on a computer as well. And they have some different choices here. They could get a hint if they're not sure what's happening. It says the package falls, it retains the sideways speed it had inside the plane. So let's see if we can start clicking on these. Now, if I'm doing well, this little kind of meter on the right will continue to move up, and I will be given harder questions that are available in our system. And then if I just start randomly guessing, and let's see if I just type in random stuff, trying different pieces, it's going to go back down. And the closer it gets to that bottom part, you'll see it start flashing. And so you start seeing different pieces. And as soon as you start really struggling and kind of going from there based on how well you've been doing or what's happening, our system's actually going to pop up some recommendations. And those are similar to those pieces that you were seeing at the bottom. They're different modality types that allow you to understand this concept better. And that way a student is really encouraged to continue to learn more instead of just guessing their way through the system. So they could try these, they can then return to practice. And there's a couple other pieces here that I just want to point out. One is the scratch pad. So especially on a tablet or a phone, if they're doing stuff on the go, they can access this to do various math problems and kind of see what's happening. So that's one option as they work their way through it along with the hint. And then if for some reason they found something that they thought could be better worded or a typo somewhere or something like that, they're welcome to click this improve this question and help us continue to adapt these questions and make them even better for future users. So all sorts of different options as you go through here. Whenever they're done answering questions, they can submit this to the system and it will score it. And this gives me the number I got correct out of my goal of 10, the option to keep practicing, move on to a different concept, and some of the information about how I'm doing. And we'll go through these score reports a little bit more, but just to give you an idea, the student sees this right away when they access this, and then this will be the same thing that you'll be seeing as a teacher. So all sorts of different options. And you kind of can go down and even review the answers some more. So as I said, we'll go into depth in that as we continue on. But if I close out of this, I want to bring you to two other pages that might be useful kind of in the general pieces of CK12. So one is actually, if I just went to the URL, ck12.org/practice. And this gives you an overview on practice. So whenever you get off of this, if you're interested in learning more, you can try it. You can view all that practice, which takes you to that main browse page. And it gives you a little bit more information to kind of go through that and understand your goal is to get 10 correct. As we said, it will adjust to easy, medium, harder questions based on how a student is doing, and then make those recommendations. So definitely a useful URL to work with if you want that quick overview. And then the other thing is at the bottom of this page, if I go to the Tools and Apps link, this will take me to our tools and apps. And the very first tool and app, our options, are 3 apps that we offer from CK12. And this third one is that practice app. So that's a place that if you're not sure where to get it, you could go to that page, click on the download option, and download that on a phone or a tablet to see those pieces. So This is kind of the super quick overview that we're working with, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of what our adaptive practice tool looks like in terms of some of the questions. You saw some open response questions and multiple choice questions mixed in there. And so I'm going to pause for a few minutes and see if you guys have any questions for us, and then we can go into more details on the different components of groups and assigning work and going from there. So it looks like there aren't currently any questions. Don't forget that Q&A option. You're welcome to continue to put those questions in there. One of the biggest ones we probably get is the difference between something that I customized or if I started to customize it, what that might look like or how that might affect the system. So as a reminder, if we go back to that practice option, so ck12.org/practice, our practice system has a goal of 10 correct. So that's what you're working off of. If I customized it and made some choices in there, then it would be out of whatever the percentage of questions I put in there. And if I started to customize this kind of variation and adaptive component, we don't want to override the work that you're doing. So that would be something that kind of sits in the regular practice if you're just assigning straight practice. And it looks like we have one question about where the tools are again. So on any of our CK12 pages, if I just scroll all the way to the bottom, this is our footer. So you can see here a link to our webinars right here. So that's a great page that you guys have probably had a chance to visit based on what you're doing here today. But then under the CK12 option is this tools and apps link, and that will take you to our tools and apps page. And in addition to our 3 apps, it goes into more of those learning management systems that we referenced as well. So I would say at this point, we'll probably continue on. And if we have time at the end, we'll continue to break for questions as we go through, but feel free to just keep putting them in that Q&A and we'll continue to answer them as we go.
Thanks, Katie. At this point, then, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the presentation here, and we will pick up talking about groups. So CK12 groups, what is it? Both CK12 groups allow for sharing resources and group discussions. Classes also allow for assignments and student reports. Why should I use it? Students can learn from each other, teachers can track student progress, and shared resources can allow for easy access to learning. And where do I get it? You can create and access CK12 groups through your dashboard or the groups icon at the top of any CK12 page. At this point, I'm going to turn it to Katie so she can demonstrate some of the functionality of our groups.
Thanks, Ryan. And we had one more question come in that I'm going to just answer while we're kind of in this break between what is happening. The question was about integrating with learning management systems such as Schoology. We actually are fully integrated with Schoology. You can assign work within there and see student progress, as well as Canvas and Edmodo. And then we're working on shortly doing that for Google Classroom as well. So those are all options. If we have time at the end, I can show you some more information on that. But for right now, we'll stick with kind of the practice within CK12. But definitely check out that tools and apps page for the integration with Schoology. So as Ryan said, we're going to move over into here. I'm going to share my screen again. And we are going to go into groups. So if I go back to CK12, let's see, there we go. Looks like you guys can see that screen. So there's 2 ways to access groups. I can click on my dashboard, which gives me an overview of everything that I have. Right now, it looks like I have 16 groups in the system. You can see some of the practice I was just looking at and trending pieces on my dashboard. And I can click on groups here, or I can just go directly there from the top navigation options. And right here, one thing to point out is that if this is new to you, it's going to pop up these tutorials. So follow and track progress. It'll give you this demo class, what's happening. I can see drop down to see my assignments, see which students have completed their assignments, kind of new activity if members have joined it, and then view my updates at a glance. So all of this information is right here on this kind of general groups page, and I can access different pieces. If you want to see that tutorial again, as it notes right here, I could always reopen the tutorial for this page. So just know that that tutorial is accessible for you just to get an overview if you need help as you go through. So the first thing you're probably going to want to do is to create a brand new group. So in order to do that, I'm going to click this plus sign, and I'm going to create a group. Now, this helps give an understanding of kind of the difference between groups and what we call the study group option versus kind of that class group option. So right here, if you have any question, it reminds you that a class allows you to assign homework, track student progress, and have class discussions. If I chose study group instead, I could chat about group projects and study with friends. So let's say we'll make a demo study group. I can even pick my subjects and a theme, and I can create that new group. Now, once it does that, I can go into my study group, and you'll be able to see the general layout of here. So I have Q&A pieces. It allows me to ask different questions. I can share resources as I go through. So if I'm anywhere on my site where you see that shared a group option, those will start showing up in here. And I can go into members and actually add new members through the settings option. So if I click on settings, I can email instructions. I have a group link and a code. And we're going to go through this a little bit more in the class group. So just to give you an idea kind of what a study group looks like. Now, if I went instead and I had chosen to make a class group, I'm going to open up this integrated grades, and this is a class group. So you'll see that there's a bunch of stuff already happening in this group. This is the newest information. So we had a physics student join, a Jumpstart student join. I changed something, updated an assignment. So this gives you kind of that feed of that information. My shared resources here, there's still nothing in here yet, so you're not going to see that at this point in time. Q&A is the same. But for a class specifically, you have a lot of options. So we have a couple of students in here, and I can add students as a teacher. So we have some options to invite students by email. That will pop up my email platform and kind of allow me to do that. I can add students without an email. So for teachers, especially that work with younger kids that don't have email, there are options to do that. I could find existing students on the site. So if I had been working with students already, I could add them to this particular group. So if I already have them in one class and I wanted to maybe break up and create a separate kind of subgroup so that I could assign different work to a subset of my class, I could add them in there pretty easily. Or I could even upload a class roster. So all sorts of different ways to add students to your group and make sure that you have everyone in there that you need. Now, I'm going to go to settings for a second, because settings would be the same for both a class and a study group. So I can, once again, add students from here. This group code we'll talk about at the end of this, but if I wanted to join another group, then that group code would be super helpful, or I could give that to my students. But if they're already logged in, I usually find it easier just to copy this link, which includes the same group code. And that, if I give that to my students and they're logged in and they click on it, it automatically adds them to this group. And so they don't have to think about it. They just click, they're done, they're in, we're good to go. The other settings here are email notifications. So this would be how often I want to get emails, and that people have been adding maybe different Q&A pieces in there or something in there, but that will update that piece. And then Q&A settings. So if you, for some reason, didn't want your class having a discussion within there, you could turn that off. And if you wanted to allow them to post questions and not worry about whether or not they, were looking like they weren't understanding something, you could choose to turn on anonymous posting or turn it back off if you want to see where the questions and comments are coming from. So definitely options within there. And then kind of as you're working your way through the assignment piece, we can see different assignments. And we're going to talk about assignments and reports in a little bit. So we'll kind of save these as we work our way through. But just understand that these assignments and reports you will only see within a CK12 class, not within a CK12 study group. So make sure that if you're trying to assign content, that you want to do that there. And then the other note that's kind of the difference between study and class groups is that in a class, there's one teacher that's the primary owner and leader, and they're the person that can share resources within that group. So if you want to be able to collaborate with colleagues and all share resources, or have students work together in a study group, that's really what that is for. Whereas in this case, so students aren't kind of overloading the group with random resources, you as the teacher are the one that's sharing content within there. So just kind of understand those different pieces, and you can go through as well. And then the last thing to think about is, as we said, that group code. So let's say I was a student, or I had a colleague that made a group that I wanted to join. So I can just click on here, and instead of clicking create a group, I could join a group. And that group code just gets pasted in here, and then I could join that particular group. So know that you can both create your own groups, whether that's a class group or a study group, or you could choose to join a group if you wanted to kind of join someone else's group as you worked your way through. So hopefully that gives you kind of an idea, but just, that's step one before you create assignments, because if you don't have a class to attach them to, then you're not going to be able to assign them to your students. So kind of first step, create that class, and then all of those little pieces and all the little nitpicky kind of parts would continue in the advanced part, but the next part of this webinar is go through more of that assignment and study group pieces. And don't forget that tutorial if you need a little bit of extra help as you work your way through.
Thanks, Katie. We'll let you catch your breath for a second and see if there are any questions that anyone has about the group functionality before we move on. All right, so at this point, if there are no questions because of the extensive demo, and you can wait till the end if you need any more questions answered, we'll go ahead and start by sharing my screen and get back to the presentation. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. So at this point, we actually wanted to stop and put a spotlight on one of our CK12 active teachers, who is Jessica Favela-Casillas. She's a chemistry teacher at Austin High School in El Paso, Texas. It was amazing to be in her classroom and see all the different CK12 tools she uses with students who access CK12 on laptops, tablets, and mobile phones. Let's take a look.
I like to use CK12 groups to assign resources. It's completely accessible and versatile. And the fact that I can edit the textbook makes it a little more personal. So my students see that, oh, well, Miss Favela-Casillas went ahead and edited it for us. Therefore, I should read it. I better read it. I've shared a resource. You have two shared resources here, okay? You're going to get the one that says types of reactions. Later on, you guys are going to answer a Q&A. And by the end of the lesson, you'll be able to figure out what kind of reaction it is just by looking at it. I found that a lot of students relied on their phones, and sometimes I have, like right now, I have kids who were absent the day before, and I needed it to be easy for them to just go to whatever it is that I'm asking. So what I did was I created a poster with a QR code they could easily scan, and they had the codes that were particular to their group number, which was their period number. I divided them by class. I thought that was easier and way more efficient. I didn't have to waste time creating a login, and that group number just takes them straight to what they need. In all, it's a very positive movement, the fact that anybody can use these textbooks anywhere, really. If I tell them to read it before class, they will go and read it before class. There is no excuse for them not being able to learn. There's no excuse for them not being able to acquire any kind of information.
All right, thanks, Jessica. So with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and move into assignments and reports. So I'm just gonna take a moment and introduce this topic. So what is it? Use the CK12 Groups tool to create single or multi-concept assignments and review student progress. Assignments are just that, something you want your students to complete. Reports allow you to see their progress on any of your assignments that you create. Why should I use it? Teachers can see how students are progressing and tailor their teaching accordingly. Creating assignments allows you to see how students are progressing. Assignments for other modalities are simply whether they access text or a video, or got to play around on a sim sandbox, or answer a question for a Plix. For practice, assignments are either general 10 questions right goals based on student competency, or specific questions and requirements if you took the time to customize it into a quiz. And where do I get it? Assignments can be created and reports accessed on www.ck12.org through any class group or through any integrated LMS. Major modalities can be quick assigned to groups from their page. Assignments for practice can also be created from within the groups. All reports are accessed through your corresponding class group on CK12. At this time, again, I'm going to take a moment, pass it over to Katie so she can demonstrate a little bit more about assignments and reports.
Thanks, Ryan. So I'm going to start by continuing to share my screen for our teachers. So let's see if that kicks in. Great. And I want to talk about kind of all of the different modalities that you can assign to start with. So we had a question that came in that asked about kind of curriculum for 9th grade students. So thinking about different options, let's say they were taking an algebra class. So I could pick a different topic in there, say linear inequalities, and I could go to that concept page and I could assign a number of different options. So if I went into basic inequalities here, I could assign that particular read to my students. I could, if I went into the matching interactive, so this is what we call a PLIX. So PLIX stands for play, learn, interact, and explore. And there's different options for students to kind of play around with different things, see what's happening, adjust components, and answer questions. So that assigned to class option is actually up at the top. So you'll see those pieces there. If I went back to that same concept page, I could assign my practice or even my real world application. As I'm working my way in here, I could assign those. So a lot of different options for assigning. And if you see the practice up at the top, you can actually even preview it or assign that practice from that button and those options as a teacher. So depending on the different type of resource you're in, you'll see those assign options. I'm going to go to, let's say, simulations as well, just so you can see that for a second. So I could browse my simulations from here, just like I was browsing practice. And this is a chance to browse our other interactive. But if I go into that simulation and our physics sims are here, we actually are starting to beta test our chemistry sims. So start checking those out as well. And if I went into this particular question right here, then I could assign this to my class. Students would see the option to turn it in kind of once they hit this, what we call our sandbox environment, where they actually get to start adjusting components and seeing how things work. But all of our core modalities, you have options to assign. So just kind of wherever that happens to be within the system. So on the left side or in sort of those bigger environments from that top option. There's one other way that you could go about assigning, and let's pick English as a whole. So we have a couple of English books. They're not necessarily broken up into core concepts in the same way that our math and science content is, but they were partnerships that we did with other universities or teachers or various situations to kind of get some of those resources. In this particular case, if I went into any of these topics, so let's say I wanted to talk about parts of the sentence, I could go into that section within there. And once I get to this level within the text, then you'll start seeing these icons here. And they're the same, but sometimes they might be an icon versus the full assigned to class option. That's still a way that I could assign this particular text to there. So text that's not correlated directly with all of the concepts and the other resources, you might have to assign that way, but it is still an option. Now, that's the teacher option in terms of assigning to class. I'm going to actually switch screens for a second, and I'm going to go into a student option. So at this point in time, you can see the Jumpstart Student is my demo option. Here, when I scroll down, I'll see study guides instead of the schools piece right there. So it's different ways that you can look at. So let's talk about at what point I could start seeing that submit option. So I'm going to open groups. This particular student is within my grades piece. So there's a bunch of different assignments they could be working on. Let's just open a few and show you what that might look like. So this PLIX right here that we're working out of, here's the option. It's due, I put a due date on this, so it's due in a couple days, and the student could start this. And because we really want to encourage them to explore and work with this, you'll notice at the top it says, this is currently assigned to you. Try some challenge questions to turn in this assignment. So they can't just click on it and have it submit and say they're done. They actually have to start these questions here and start answering some of the questions. And then it will register that they started working on that particular piece. So that's an option for doing that, and they can continue to explore and understand and kind of play around with these different pieces within the simulation, or in the Plex in this case. Now, if I close that out and I went back into my assignments, so let's say that one's all set. I'm going to close that for a minute, and I wanted to look at ecosystems. So this was just a particular read that I was working off of. At this point in time, once I've read it as a student and I go into this, I can choose to turn it in. So you'll start seeing this turn in button as you work your way through as a student. So make sure that if they want to get credit, they're choosing to turn that in as they work through. Similarly, if they went to practice, so let me close this for a second. So ecosystems practice, they could start that practice. They'd start practicing. And then maybe they got that one correct or incorrect. I got 1 out of 3 correct. They might start guessing. If they were gonna, this submit option just kind of loads in the system. So it started recording this option. Now, this has been a little bit confusing for some of our students and teachers in terms of when they want to choose to turn it in. So shortly, this will change where instead of it just auto-registering, the students will start seeing this option. So they'll start seeing that same turn in button on their practice. So let's say they got 80% correct, or they were getting close to the time that something was due. They could then choose to click the turn it in button. This is coming shortly, so you won't see this right now. So just note that this is happening in the near future. So at that point in time, they're going to want to start turning in their practice that way. And let's say they did that practice, they got 8 out of 10 correct. And then it gives them this prompt. It says, okay, you haven't gotten 100% yet. Do you still want to turn in your score at this point in time? They can choose to turn it in just so they have it recorded. But then even after that, they'll still see the option to turn it again. So if they keep practicing it, they still have that option to go back in and turn in a higher score to you if they wanted to before that due date. So just know that this is coming shortly. And at that point in time, they'll want to click and actually submit their work, not just to the system, but turn it in to you as a teacher. So one option to kind of think about as you work your way through. But students have those choices within the system to do some practice and to submit it. Sometimes it will record it. For the simulation, it's once you get to that kind of what we call that sandbox environment. And let's see, actually, these are completed assignments. These are my incomplete assignments. So if a student can't find something, they wanted to do it again, they should check that completed piece. And let's look at the phases of the moon, because that is actually a simulation. And you'll see where that option is to turn in. So here, I need to actually proceed to the simulation and start kind of playing around with it, and then I can turn this in at the top there. So just something to keep in mind. I'm going to switch back to our teacher screen so that we can continue to look at what you would be seeing, but I wanted to make sure that you understood what a student would see instead of the assign options, but rather the choice to turn it in. So once a student has done this practice, what does that look like? So if I go into the assignments, or even if I wanted to create more assignments, I can go into this part right here. This is the one I built previously, so there's a bunch of assignments in there. And I'm going to click on these assignments here. Now, any of these things that I clicked that assign to class button will show up here. I could have picked a date. I can actually edit some of this. I could change the due date or edit the assignment itself. Or even delete the assignment if I would never intended to use it again. So options as we work our way through. These ones I have assigned to my class. If I assign something else to a different class, it will still show up as an option in here. So I don't necessarily have to redo the entire thing again and recreate the assignment. I can instead just assign that directly to this class as well. So that's great if you have, smaller subsets or multiple periods that you want to assign the same thing to. So options as you work your way through. A multi-concept assignment, so actually this integer addition and subtraction, it has two concepts. That you would need to actually make from here, this create an assignment piece from within the actual groups feature. The other ones are just one hit. I'm looking at a particular topic or a particular modality, and I'm going to assign it directly. But those, what I consider kind of higher level skills for a teacher in terms of creating multi-concept assignments, would be covered in that customizing class. So if you have questions, definitely save them and I'll go through them, but I'm going to just note that it's an option that you can work on from here, and then you can kind of check it out if you want to on your own. And then let's go into reports. So once I click on reports, a note, you can still see all these icons. So if you're having questions on kind of what to do, you can always go back to home from there and see the different things, but click on reports. And right now you can see the Jumpstart student, physics student, and another person have done different pieces. Now, this is just telling me that they've completed that or submitted work as I went through. In this particular case, there were 2 parts to this assignment, so it looks like this first person has done 1 out of those 2 parts, but not all of the parts within there. So that gives me a quick overview in terms of what's been happening. Now, one thing that we've been asked recently is, well, what if I have 2 kids with the same name in my class? So right now you're seeing first names within this piece, in this case, Jumpstart, Physics, and Ryan. Soon as well, just like we're kind of updating the actual turning in and submitting piece, soon you'll start seeing full names. So you'll see last name, comma, first name, just like you would expect to see in a grade book or to help you kind of sort your students accordingly. So that's coming shortly. So just keep an eye out for that, and hopefully that will be helpful as you go through. But for right now, we're going to look at what this looks like within this particular piece. So you have the names here and then the assignments up at the top. And I can choose to look at a particular student. So let's say I wanted to see this particular student. They haven't done this practice or that one. The ones that have check marks are the assignments that aren't practice or quizzes. So they actually access this read or this particular Plix. Here they've done 7 out of 10. Here they haven't even touched it yet. So I can quickly see a student's overview, or I could go into a particular topic and see how they actually were doing. So if you remember earlier when I showed you the part where a student got a score report at the end, this is the same score report that you're seeing. So you can see the number correct, their streak that they got correct, the length of time that they spent on it, and kind of where that, hey, I'm bumping you to higher level questions, or maybe if they're this low, they were just prompted to actually check something else out as they work their way through. And I tend to use this and think about it as a really great conversation starter with the students. If they spent 36 seconds and they answered 15 questions and they were getting half of them wrong, then that tells me that they're not actually reading the question and putting the thought into it. And that may be not a comprehension issue, but really just an effort or timing issue. If they're spending a ton of time and they're still struggling, then we're going to go down and we're going to say, okay, well, you were getting all easy questions because you were struggling. And so did you actually read one of those recommended resources? Did you check out an interactive? And you can even go all the way down and see how the student did. So they got the couple correct. This one, they typed in 18 or chose 18 instead of 13. As they work their way in here, it shows you the actual questions. And this is true for both the teacher and the student. You can actually see all the way down to the details on how they're doing. So that's the score report that you would get for any particular student on any particular assignment. Now, if I went back to reports as a whole, I could pick a topic. Let's say I looked at the integer addition and subtraction. And once I click on that topic and that assignment, it shows me, okay, this person got 10 out of 10 correct for both parts of it. This person, as we were just looking at, got that 7 out of 10, and they haven't started this other half. So the initial part tells me just kind of what they've done, and then by clicking on any particular piece, it tells me, did they do it? Or if it's, let's see if we can find another one that is actually practice. So in here, I think that's the only one that we'd worked on so far. So it gives me the actual percentages. So just kind of know that you can look at those as a whole for the whole class and kind of a quick hit once you click on any particular assignment. And that will be alphabetical by last name shortly. But then when you're actually in it, it gives you all of those little details as you're working your way through. So kind of keep that in mind as you go through. And as I mentioned before, you can access through groups here, or you can click on your dashboard. And if we look at that here, and I go to the groups option on here, I can see it's going to load this information. It says I have a few members. So far, I've assigned 6 pieces, and 2 completed this one. 1 didn't complete the Plix option yet. Let's see if I go to this part. 1 person's done, 2 are not done because one of my students had done half but hadn't completed that assignment. So that's your kind of quick overview as you work your way through. So it looks like we have some questions, so maybe we'll pause there and get some of those answered for you guys.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, one of the first questions we got was about the idea of due dates. So the user wanted to know, does the due date block the access if they access it later? I'm guessing like past the deadline.
Yeah, so due dates are a little bit interesting. It doesn't completely block access, and I don't necessarily have an example in here that I can show you in terms of the late. If they had done something, if they hadn't done it at all, let me pull up this report again for a second. So let's say I pull this up here. If they hadn't done it at all before that due date, then you're going to see they'll still be able to access it and practice it. So our system is really a learning system. Students could access that regardless. In terms of the report that you're going to see, if they didn't do it before the due date and then they did it afterwards and they turn it in then, you'd get a little kind of clock, which is the indication that that particular assignment was turned in late. If instead they did a portion of that assignment, let's say they got 70% by the due date, that's the score you're going to see. They could continue to work on it and build that skill, but it would record the score at the due date so that whatever they completed at that point in time would be marked as the correct turned in on time component. They could show you their score report if you wanted to kind of see any work that they had done past that date. But if they haven't done it at all, they do have the chance to still submit it, and it would mark it with a little timer kind of saying it's late at this point in time.
Great. There was another question just kind of trying to understand like all of the different resources that we have at CK12. So maybe you can pull up like a concept page and just kind of give us a brief explanation again of what each of the different types of resources are.
Sure. Let me pull up a couple of different choices in here. So I'm going to pick a physics one just because that will have a number of different options as well as a simulation. So let's see the projectile motion one that we were working with. So this has a bunch of different choices in here. So we have what we call our reads, and this would be like a section in a textbook. So you have a lesson that goes with this. In this case, we have a number of different simulations, one on archery, a water fountain simulation, kind of one of our older simulations. You might see some videos in any particular concept, and those would be anything from a video that we'd created, one that we'd partnered with another organization with, or kind of a recommended teacher video. Study aids are interesting. Study aids are these great quick hits for students that want to review core content. So those might be useful for students as they're looking at the different options for a particular topic. And then the assessment and practice. So that's kind of your core for what might be a science concept. You might also see a Plix here. If I picked a different core concept, let's say I went into trigonometry and we talked about right triangles and Pythagorean triples. Here we see a read, a video practice, and our Plix. So that's that interactive option. So those are kind of our core content areas. What you would expect is a textbook section, videos, practice, and some sort of interactive, as well as our real world applications. So those are all different options. That featured content, all of those are assignable. If I click on any one of these, I could then assign that to my class just right off the bat from there and not even kind of worry about doing it from within groups. So that's the idea of concepts and the different modalities for a particular topic, and you can access that by browsing it or searching accordingly. If you wanted to do a whole curriculum, let's say you were teaching, high school physical science or something like that, You could go into the textbooks there. And actually, it looks like these ones are both geared for middle school. I think our earth science ones are the ones that overlap. So here you'll see earth science concepts for high school and earth science concepts for middle school. I can go into those books and I can share these to my class. This little, there's sometimes you'll see like a little green icon at the bottom that I can share. Here we are, the share me. I could share that way. I could share different resources to a group. And so let's share this to a group so you can see what it looks like. See if we'll keep loading this piece. And we have lots of different options in here. Here we go. If I share this whole book to that group, and then I go back into my group, I can now actually see that resource in here. So let's see our integrated grades. I just shared this option and you'll see, okay, I have a shared resource that's a textbook. I can kind of sort by different types or by who shared a resource if it's a study group. But so that option, that would actually be the full book. So if I open that back up again, you can see the different sections within that book. And I can't assign the entire textbook to my students. I have to actually get down into the level of a section within there. So here's the chapter level. Here's my different sections within here. And then you'll notice I can actually assign this particular option, or if it's a concept, we usually have attached practice. So I could assign the practice questions that go with that. So this would be the assigned to class option would be assigning the read itself, and the assigned practice would be that other option within there. So you can definitely explore by concept or by entire books as you work your way through. But just kind of keep those in mind in terms of the type of resource that you're assigning will either give a student a check, or if it's practice or a quiz, then it would give them that grade percentage as you worked your way through.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing all those resources, Katie. So at this time then, I think I'm going to go ahead and take the screen back. And we're going to go ahead and start the wrap-up process at this point and just kind of go over some of the essentials about CK12 and future webinars. But as always, if you'd like to stay on till the end, we're happy to answer all of your questions at that point. In terms of the tools and apps, Katie mentioned this earlier during the presentation, but if you go to ck12.org/tools and apps, or if you scroll down to the bottom of the page, in the footer, you can find access to the tools and apps. That's a great place to find information and links to our practice app, our Flexbook app, and our simulations app, which actually allow for offline use. Further down that same page at the bottom, you'll see information on various learning management systems that are integrated with CK12, including Canvas, Edmodo, Google Classroom, and Schoology as well, which we referred to earlier. Another really great place where you can learn a little bit more about all CK12 resources is at www.ck12.org/overview. It's just a really useful place where you can learn kind of at the high level about all of our different types of resources. So you can learn about our Flexbook textbooks, you can learn about concept-based learning, adaptive practice, and many of the other resources that we offer as an organization. A great way to continue the conversation or network with CK12 users and get support from our staff is to join a CK12 Cafe. From our homepage, you can click on Cafe to see our various forums for both students and educators. I'd recommend you join the Jumpstart for Educators Cafe and keep checking back as we add state-specific forums. If you love our Plix, the Cafe is a great place to let our team know what Plix you want to see featured the next week. Just reply to the post there, and they will use suggestions to choose the next math and science Plix of the week in the Plix corner. You can then use the Plix questions of the week to see what your students have to say and create discussion in your classroom. Your students can share ideas in the Plix corner and learn from the rest of the CK12 community. And since we know you enjoy our webinars, we wanted to encourage you to go ahead and check out our future webinars. If you go to www.ck12.org/webinars, you'll be able to see all of our future offerings. We'll be offering Everything CK12 to give an overview of all CK12 resources on November 30th at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we'll also be offering advanced flexbook editing, where we'll go into some more of the technical aspects, where you can learn how to do more advanced edits, include multimedia, and do everything you need in order to make your flexbook exactly what you want for your classroom. And that will be on December 12th at 3:30 Pacific Standard Time. I also want to let you know about CK12 Certified Educator page. This past summer, we ran a 4-week program that took the major components of CK12 and went into depth, just like we did today with practice in groups. The CEP page has all of our archived videos and resources. If you're interested in getting a jumpstart on your certification for next year, please email jumpstart@ck12.org and we can share any assignments and information you may need. Also, before we end the webinar, we'll encourage you to answer a short questionnaire to give us feedback on the content and presentation of today's webinar, as we're always looking to improve your experience. The link to the Google form is listed on the screen, tinyurl.com/CK12webinar17, and it's also being messaged to everyone in the chat window. We'll send it to you in a follow-up email as well, just in case. And last but not least, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Let me assure you that you will continue to be supported by our team here at CK12, and we are always happy to help you in any way. Just send us an email anytime to support@ck12.org. Don't forget to let your social networks know about CK12 and your participation in our webinars. We're on all the socials as CK12 Foundation, or you can always #CK12. Okay, that's it for today's core programming, but as promised, we're happy to stay on and answer any additional questions that you'd like our team to answer.
So Ryan, thanks so much for wrapping that up. I'm gonna actually share my screen one more time so that we can do some demo as we go through. Just to note, all of those kind of resources that Ryan was speaking about, a lot of them you can find at the bottom. The overview of resources is under CK12 resources right here. That gets us to our overview page. Webinars, once again, information about our certified educator program, tools and apps, as we said. So lots of different great resources are down in that footer. And even some of the video testimonials, you got to see one today, but that's a great place to check those out. So keep in mind our footer is an option. And then the cafe, we can just click on right here and you can see kind of the different pieces, the math and science corners, our Plix corner, and then some resources for educators as well. So feel free to check those out. We had one question that asked about assigning to multiple classes. So I'm just going to go back to that same section I was looking at on middle groups. And if I go up to the top and I click assign to class, it actually loads all of the classes that I have under this account. So I could assign this to integrated grades. I could assign it to a demo for a different school district, to my summer certification program, and I can even set different due dates for those classes based on whether or not they are in kind of the same block or they're missed a week because of a snow day or who knows what. I can change those due dates. The due date's the one thing that's adjustable per section. If you're going to start changing the actual content, you would need to assign it separately. But if it's just the same instructions and a different due date, you can say, check out this section and bring in notes tomorrow for class. And then I could assign it to my class. And that would quickly assign it to all of those different sections. So as you notice, it assigned it to 3 different sections or 3 different classes within CK12. So that was the last question that I know of. I would say feel free to continue to post questions. We'll stay on for a few more minutes. And I will maybe just kind of demo a quick option for practice and adjusting pieces. So if I went into, we were doing an example with factors and factor pairs. If I clicked this customize option, that's what you're going to want to start exploring. And the next level of this workshop would be the customizing practice. And I can start adding in new questions. I can show hints or not show hints. I can choose the order. I can change the number of attempts. Just note that if you start making choices and you start customizing, you do lose that adaptive component. So our adaptive practice is that it really adapts based on how students are doing. If you start setting specific questions or you start customizing into a quiz, our system is not going to override your choices. So just know that that's the difference between a quiz, whether or not you use it as a quiz, and our actual adaptive practice. And then we just got a question about our newest favorite feature that I'm eager to share. I'm actually super excited that Google Classroom integration is coming out shortly. So we will kind of add in a webinar very, very soon, but I'm going to click on Tools and Apps here. You can see our Flexbook and Physics Sims app, which allow for offline access, and that's amazing for students that don't have consistent internet. But if you look down here right now, Google Classroom, we can share to Google Classroom. So if I clicked on that little green share plane, I could share something directly to Google Classroom. For Edmodo and Schoology and Canvas, you can actually see student assignments within those platforms at this point in time. And it's coming soon for Google Classroom. So as soon as that goes live, I'm going to be super excited because I was in schools all of about a week ago down in New York and New Jersey, and every single school I was in used Google Classroom. So for them to be able to see student progress directly in that same platform will be super awesome. We had a question about accessing this webinar at a later date. So if I go to that webinars page, so you can go down to the footer, click on webinars or ck12.org/webinars. You'll see right now we're on groups in practice, our upcoming webinars, and below that are all of our archived webinars. So by tomorrow, usually within about 24 hours, we get our video up from the previous webinar. So you'll be able to check that out and see that. If you missed any previous ones, you can also see those here. So here's our Flexbooks 101, Introduction to Flexbooks, our Sims and Interactives, and then our Science and Math teacher ones are really strategy-based, using CK12 for warm-ups or for kind of filling in gaps or different pieces as you work your way through. But all of our webinars are archived and available for you at any point in time. So I think we've cleared out our Q&A option. We'll give you maybe another little bit to let us know if you have other questions. Yeah. So it looks like we have one person that isn't seeing the left sidebar that includes the assign a class option. I'm just going to show that one more time in here. So there's two different ways that you might see that. If you see it within a concept, so let's say I went into cell bio, and on the left side of my text, I would see this assign to class feature. So you're going to see that for all of our core content areas. You might not see it for some of our random extra different types of modalities, but kind of all of our core content, you should see the assign to class option. If I access something that wasn't tagged to a concept, so if I went back here and I looked at my textbook and kind of our original textbook that wasn't tagged to concepts, life science for middle school, you might be seeing within, now remember you have to get down to the level of the actual concept. So you won't see it for a chapter or a textbook, but if I get into the level of the concept, you'll still see it here as this little clipboard. So hopefully that is showing up for you if the full assign to class feature isn't. So definitely just change and make sure that happens too if your browser is more narrow than you might otherwise have it. So just check out your little icons. You still have your same assign to class, add to library. If you hover over them, they'll pop up those options. You can add this section to another Flexbook, even note or highlight, and our offline reader. So they're all still available there. They just may be an icon format instead of the wider kind of text format. And if you at any point in time, I'm going to point out one more thing kind of before we wrap up, and that's our help option. So if you're having any trouble, you're welcome to click on help and check out our help desk or use our support feature here, or always email support@ck12.org, and we're happy to troubleshoot and work through anything with you. So I think with that, we're out of questions. So maybe we'll have Ryan wrap this up and go from there.
Sounds good, Katie. I'll go ahead and we will be just ending our presentation at this time. We just want to say thank you so much for joining us today, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.